We will call the Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order, the November 24th meeting 2015. Those in attendance, Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattaponi District, Mr. Jeff Black, representing the Western Caroline District, Mr. Reggie Underwood, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Wayne Akers, representing the Madison District, Mr. Jeff Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, and I'm Calvin Taylor, and I represent the Port Royal District. If we could stand for the invocation at this time. Let us bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we come to Thee at this hour, thanking Thee for Thy blessings, and thanking Thee for this opportunity to meet and to discuss those things which prove to be of interest and importance to the citizens of this county. We ask You to give us guidance and wisdom, and help us to make those decisions that prove to be in the best interest of those that we serve. These and all the blessings we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. If you would join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, no amendments.
Okay. There are none. Then the agenda will stand approved as presented, and that takes us to opening board comments. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have a couple today. Excuse me. Last week I attended the opening of the VRE Spotsylvania Station, represented the county there. It was a $25 million expansion that was the first station added in, I think, almost 23 years was the actual number. So we hope it doesn't take that long to continue the expansion, but we'd like to see it expand as soon as possible. Another transportation issue, I don't know if the rest of the board got a email yesterday about HB2, but there were, I think it was in the paper today, there were 321 applications that totaled $6.9 billion with $1.2 billion available. So we are part of that 321, and I just wanted the board to be aware in case you didn't see it, but it could get quite interesting when the final selections are made in, I think, January and February. And then the last one is, since our last board meeting, there have been several terrorist attacks. And I would like to offer my prayers to Paris, of course, Mali, and the other sites that were affected. And really remind everyone that these criminal acts will not derail freedom. They will only strengthen our resolve to achieve it. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just have one. On Saturday, I had an opportunity to attend the, I guess it was a Thanksgiving dinner put on by the McShin Foundation for the Caroline County Recovery Program. I think that is a great program that is here in Caroline. I had the opportunity to talk to a couple individuals who were in the program and exactly what the program meant to them. So it was kind of pretty touching, and it's nice to see some success stories from that program. So these are people who are trying to get back on their feet and getting some help. So rather than go through the cycle of continuing to go into jail continuously, obviously I think it's a little bit, it's working quite well. So that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Underwood?
Only one comment, Mr. Chairman. With Thanksgiving coming, I'd ask that we all think of others, and certainly if we know of anyone who's less fortunate, who needs a hand, certainly in the spirit of Thanksgiving, let's do all we can to ensure that every citizen has a hot meal on Thanksgiving Day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Mr. Akers?
I have no comments.
Okay. Mr. Seeley?
Along with Mr. Underwood's comment, I will tell you that social services was a few short on a few baskets, and the community has come out in great success in helping fulfill those needs. And I think that those in need that everybody was aware of, and the few that the churches take care of that people may not be aware of, have been taken care of. And I will say that the county citizens have been more than gracious and more than helpful for those folks. And I want to thank social services for all they did in that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. I just have one. I would like to remind the board and certainly the citizens of the December 3rd Senior Citizen Gala. It's quite an affair, and we give honor to the senior citizens of the county. So that's December 3rd. I believe it's from 6 to 9 at Caroline High School. You may want to get there a few minutes early. As you know, there was quite a bit of construction going on, and I don't know how it will be affected, but at least we want to get in there and get the senior citizens in, and certainly I'm sure that it will be a grand occasion, as it always is. That's all that I have. That takes us to presentations and reports. We have a discussion of the upcoming General Assembly session. We have in our presence the Honorable Mr. Robert Bobby Orrock Sr. From the Virginia House of Delegates. Mr. Orrock, it's always a pleasure to see you, and we appreciate you taking your time to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and staff. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here this evening. You know, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as I stand here before you, I sometimes wonder why I even got into politics from the standpoint my father, having served for 12 years on this county board, frankly, as a child growing up, didn't leave me with the best impression of what getting into politics was necessarily going to be. And I very much commend y'all for your service to the county. I remember very poignantly my father's remark one evening when he'd come home from a board meeting kind of late, and I still happened to be up. And he commented, he said, you know, Bobby, if I do my job right, I think I will probably upset more people than I will ever make happy. He had kind of come to that considered conclusion. In spite of that, I still got into politics. I'm not sure what that says about my judgment, but that's another matter. But it's my pleasure to be here with you all this evening. In general, with the session coming up, the good news is we are looking at some additional revenues. The bad news, in hearing from the chairman of House Appropriations, almost all of the additional revenues that we're looking at for the coming biennial budget will be absorbed by the re-benchmarking of K-12 education and the increased state demands of our share of Medicaid. And that's without Medicaid expansion. That's under the current Medicaid program. That just continues to escalate far beyond any other measure of inflation or anything else. And we're, of course, mandated to pay that. One particular matter of interest with you here, the board, and the citizens of Caroline, Supervisor Black contacted me and shared with me a resolution about grass cutting. I will say over my tenure in the General Assembly, that has been one of the more interesting discussions. And it took a long time, but finally, the legislature passed provisions whereby any county can. However, it doesn't address the circumstances that here in Caroline have arisen, y'all are trying to address, because agricultural land is not included in that automatic county ability to levy, cut the grass and then levy the cost of same. I've had legislation drafted and will be forwarding through the General Assembly process a clarification whereby, and we're kind of going back and replanting a Christmas tree as the old one used to be, where that Caroline County would be the first ornament on the tree, as it were, but where if a county wishes, in agriculturally zoned properties that are assessed at residential or commercial use. So that residential parcel, or if there's a commercial entity on the agricultural land, then the county would have the ability, if they're not maintaining it properly. I think that we're doing that narrowly enough where that the farming community will not be concerned about the potential impacts of this type of legislation. So that's my intent, and I will tell you all that that has been drafted, and it will be in the I'll probably be pre-filing it here within the next few weeks and soliciting input from the other delegation from the county. It is my great honor not only to just represent Caroline, but even though I represent the smallest portion within the House of Delegates, I do live here in the county and take great pride in being recognized when I'm called on the floor of the Assembly as the gentleman from Caroline, because I've always been. But mostly, that's pretty much it. I was going to keep it short, take any questions or comments from the board that you may have this evening, and look forward to working together as we always have.
Thank you, Delegate O'Rourke. And I'm sure the board has some concerns. I just have a couple of, I was particularly glad to hear you speak of the K-12, even though I know it makes it difficult because there are other funding needs other than education, and I do understand that. But I did have the honor of serving as the chairperson for the Education Steering Committee for VACO. And VACO has been very much supportive of the K-12 funding, to the fact that a letter has been sent to the General Assembly in that regard. And just one or two other things.
Sure.
Since we got you, you know how that goes. One of the concerns that the board, that the steering committee also had was the joint resolution 256 for the state funding of charter schools. And of course, it is not VACO's intention to tell the state, what to fund. We just want to hopefully make sure that it does not cost public education dollars. And that's the concern that VACO has about that, is that, if we fund charter schools, what is that going to do, or is that going to impact funding for public education? So that's something that we were concerned about. And one of the other issues was the school resource officers in every school, as far as it being a mandate, because again, if it's a mandate, we are concerned about the funding impact that will have on school systems, and certainly some of the larger school systems with many more schools than we have really was the driving force behind that. So,
And we are very sensitive to unfunded mandates of any description, but that one in particular. And we're in that difficult situation where in today's world, with the increased threats that we're seeing all around us, how do we adequately protect our children? On the issue of other education issues, as a career educator yourself and myself and Board Member Black, we fully much appreciate that. The figures that we've had shared with us, that if charter schools are done properly, it actually can be a win-win, where that they will not be funded to the same per pupil basis as typically they're funded in the public education system, and by removing them from the public education system, and they don't take all of the money, as it were, with them, we actually have a net gain for public education in the process. That is the objective. Plus, to give parents greater flexibility and educational choice and make them more involved in the education of their children.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, I think you had your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. O'Rourke, the gentleman from Carolina. It's a pleasure to have you back home. We appreciate that. We've got a kind of a long relationship here. With regard to the General Assembly session, I know VACO has sent another recommendation on broadband, and you can understand more than other delegates in more urban areas how critical it is here. I've often said we use the world will beat a path to your door if you can build a better mousetrap. Now you have to be connected to the internet, and a great deal of our population doesn't have that. And anything the Commonwealth could do, we tried to get a connection when Verizon put their last antenna on, but there was some federal legislation that prohibited them from helping us. So anything that the Commonwealth could do, we would appreciate that.
And I very much appreciate it. I live on the east side of 95, so I feel the pain of the folks in the trailer park on the other side have far more services than me across 95 have. Funny that, but anyway.
Well, most of the county doesn't have service, so that's really a problem. And then just a couple of more. One is, we had talked to the State Fair of Virginia before this year's fair event got shortened by rain, and they had talked about eventually having an admissions tax. Or,
Which, of course, would require legislation.
right.
Right.
And I'm not sure they would be able to do it this year, but maybe we should call it an admissions fee, since I know how that three-letter word scares a lot of people. But if you could start to at least see if that's going to be a possibility. We'd intended to come to you with their concurrence. I haven't even bothered to do that this year because I knew their revenue was lower.
Right. I will share, when issues of that type have come before the Finance Committee of late, there's been almost no appetite for their passage unless there's a requirement of a local referendum for the enactment. So I throw that out for what it's worth, that if it is to go forward, I think there would have to be a requirement that it would be put to voter referendum in Caroline before it could be effected.
Okay. Well, that's an option.
Right.
All right, that's a possibility. I mean, we could do that. And then we could, well, we'll still call it an admissions fee, just to make it
What did
feel
Romeo
better.
say? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet or not, but anyway.
We've actually danced around this in a lot of different ways. Doesn't matter party or level, we've danced around it. It's, you know.
And we've all been
fee.
bitten by it over the years.
It is what it is. It is what it is. And the last one is, you did mention funding for schools. One thing that we desperately need in Caroline is when you compute the formula for school funding, there's no transportation component.
Right.
And we have a very large rural county. If you give us the same amount of money that you give another system the same size, you're actually giving us less because we have to use more for transportation. Is there any way that the Commonwealth would consider that as part of the funding mechanism?
Unfortunately, you end up with more losers than you do winners, quite candidly. Anytime you try and readjust the formula. The Pittsylvania County, the largest geographic county in the Commonwealth, has the exact same problem, although even greater than here in Caroline. And it's a matter that has been discussed. With the ever-increasing urbanized representation among the 100 members of the House of Delegates, rural jurisdictions face ever-increasing challenges in trying to have those needs met. We're very cognizant of them, we're aware, and so far, pretty much about the best we've been able to do is make sure they don't, kind of like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. But so far as increased funding because of the geographical challenges, I'm not optimistic, but we can try. We can try and run it up the flagpole again.
Well, I'd like you to try and consider the amount of revenue Caroline just from Carmel Church and its gasoline taxes and fuels taxes sends down to Richmond. And it goes down to Richmond really fast and really in a big truck. And when it comes back from Richmond, it's really slow and in a little tiny pocketbook.
The funny thing, the folks in Fairfax say their truck sending it down there is even bigger and goes even faster, and they get even smaller trucks, as in, coming back. So, but I understand. I do
We could
fully
put up a
appreciate
toll on Carmel Church. We'd be happy to put up a toll and catch their money too. But I think you think
Right.
I
No, I
can
fully
understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black?
Yeah, I just have more of a statement. I think you and I have talked about this at school. You have in front of you, I've given you something that was put together by a lady in Charlottesville, a lawyer in Charlottesville, with regards to private water companies. I would just say that the constituents and anyone that's served by Aqua Virginia would, I'm sure, be very grateful for your support.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I have looked at it, and
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Underwood?
No comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
thank you, Mr.
Akins?
Underwood. Appreciate that.
I do. Delicate Arc, your dad and I, we served the same district, and a lot of the same people, not, of course, the people have changed over the years, but I appreciate he served my family when he was a board member, and I appreciate what he did for Caroline County. The couple of issues, and I don't know if there's anything going on in the General Assembly. I haven't heard that there are, but I do know that every time it appears that there is a group that comes and makes some noise about the BPO tax, about the machinery and tools tax, and those type of things, it appears that the legislature gets excited about it and they want to do something to help those people out. And I don't think any I know Carolina, and I don't think any other locality has implemented the B-poll tax just because they want to implement the B-poll tax. We used to have a merchant's tax in the county, and to me, that was a much more unfair tax than the B-poll, because it only dealt with inventories at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year, what you had on inventory. So that only hit the merchants that had, the grocery stores and the car dealerships and all of those type of things. So to me, it was a totally unfair tax because it was only hitting a few of the people. B-poll tax means a lot to a county such as Caroline County, especially under today's circumstances where Caroline County is starting to prosper and starting to move ahead and starting to develop. So I would trust that you would protect as best you can the B-poll tax and the machinery and tools tax that's out there, because those are sources of revenue that are very important to counties such as Caroline County, and we need to maintain those counties. Those revenues if we want to be fair to the citizens of the county. The other is the local land use authority. Oftentimes we see the General Assembly, I'm not speaking about you personally, I'm talking about the General Assembly in general. They feel like they know more about how to control a local level than than the local officials do, and I can assure you that's not true. Most of the General Assembly members have never served in local government, and so they don't know what the issues are that we at local government level have to address and try to take care of. Again, I'm asking you to protect this land use authority that the counties have for the future generations. My time is short here, so I'll not worry about a lot of that, to be honest with you, in the coming years. But I think the people that do serve Caroline County have to be cognizant of where their funds come from. And it cannot necessarily be from the landowners in Caroline County through real estate taxes. Transportation, to me, that's one of the biggest issues we're going to face right now as a county. With the developments that are coming, the Walmart, which is looking to come at Ladysmith, the Harris Teeter in Carmel Church, we really need help. And I don't know whether there's anything you can do, because I know there's a formula now that the HB2 formula, and I know that's where we're going to have to get most of our money from in order to make some big projects happen. But anything you can do to help us and that you can suggest to us as a county to bring about those things, I just feel like this board would appreciate that, because to widen 639 to the measure that it needs to be widened to manage that traffic, I think we've said we're talking about $28 million, or something along those lines. It'll be a long time for Caroline County can afford $28 million in order to widen that road. So we just need your continued help, and we appreciate what you've done. I truly do there in Richmond. And we just need your continued help to help us move ahead.
I appreciate it, Mr. Akers, and as you know, having graduated from Ladysmith High School and largely driving the exact same roads as when I started driving, I won't say how many years ago, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I understand.
The money hasn't been forthcoming from the state, and HB2 is kind of a mixed bag for counties such as Caroline. It was done largely out of compromise because the urbanized areas were screaming, wanting more revenues. And HB2 was a part of the solution to that, and also to try and prioritize better the finite resources we have and get the biggest bang for the buck, as it were. That being said, here again, the more rural jurisdictions tend to come out on the losing end of that equation. It's been interesting during the entire tenure I've been down there. There are two formulas I've never heard anybody say they like: the school funding formula or the transportation formula. And we frequently had bills in that would change the dynamic and the pieces and parts, but it's always ended up with more losers than winners. And in politics, things don't pass when more people are going to end up losing money than benefiting from it. You raised B-poll, and that is also an issue that every year comes up. I will say within the legislature there is significant sympathy for a modification of B-poll where it would be based not on the gross revenues, but rather on the net revenues, because BPOL is levying on a company or an entity that may actually be losing money.
I understand.
We have not gone that road because at the end of the day, absent finding another revenue tool for local government, then we're robbing one of the tools, taking away one of the tools that you currently have in your tool chest, and we know that's not being fiscally responsible to our local government citizens. But I would just say maybe in working within the committees in VACO, they could come up with some ideas, whereas we find a different revenue source to do away, because I've heard the argument all along, the B-poll tax was established to pay for the War of 1812. Well, I think we paid for it, but the tax is still there. And it's because we've never found anything to replace it to give local governments that revenue stream to provide the services that your citizens demand.
But unfortunately, we're fighting the war of 2015
Yes.
now. And
With
so-
money from 1812. That's
Yeah, but
really
for money from
crazy.
18, that's exactly right, from the resources from 18.
Yeah.
But no, I understand where you're coming from, but again,
Yeah.
it's, the General Assembly has restricted local
Right.
governments as to what taxes they can impose.
Right, being the Dillon Rule state, that's right.
Absolutely. And so you tell us what we can impose, and when we impose those taxes, then someone wants to take those abilities away from you. But they don't want to take the services that you pay for through those taxes away from you. And my thoughts are, and VACO has come up with it, because I was president of VACO in 2005, and we came up with some thoughts as to, hey, you take over some of the responsibilities that we are now paying for. Comprehensive Services Act is a prime example. You used to pay, I don't mean you, but the state used to pay for it. Who pays for it now?
Right.
The local government pays a large portion of that funding.
The formula there has changed from the state.
Absolutely.
yeah.
So, I mean, again, we're to the point now where there's only so much that you can take from local governments before you either have to cut services, and that's not going to be good for you or for local government, or you have to find some other source. And unfortunately, the General Assembly has not been willing to look at other sources of revenue for localities.
But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr.
Oh,
Hart.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Delegate Work and I get to speak frequently, and rather than tie up any more time, I will pass for tonight, Mr. Taylor.
To put it another way, he'll beat on me privately later. No, but not that any of you have done that, but
I understand. Again, Delegate Art, we really appreciate your being here, and we certainly appreciate your service in the House of Delegates and what you've done for Caroline County and certainly the other jurisdictions as well. Thank you again for being here.
and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and I will, in particular, Board Member Akers, brought a point. The distinction between rural and urban counties has gotten pretty blurry in recent times, because the services that the citizens demand are pretty much the same now, whether from Fairfax or wherever. And y'all don't have nearly the revenue stream, the tax base, the per capita income of the citizenry in order to generate those revenues. So y'all are in a particularly difficult posture in that regard. But I would commend you for your service. Some of you will be departing the board shortly, and I want to extend my personal appreciation for your dedication to service to the citizens of this community. And you have served well and served very honorably, and I commend you for that, because that's all at the end of the day. Any of us who seek public office, when it's all said and done, we need to be able to say we did as best we could, and go home and sleep at night having done the best and putting myself out there. So thank you all again, and wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and happy holiday, and look forward to working with you. God bless.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to an update from the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, Mr. Kerry Roberts.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint if I don't break your iPad here. What am I supposed to do now, Pam?
Speak into it.
Speak to it? Act nice? I have hard copies if you'd prefer. Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to, as I had mentioned when I was here back in the winter, I want to come by at least twice a year and give you a general update of activity. I do want to say that I've been here a little over a year now, and enjoy very much working with Gary Wilson and the team here in the county. I think we've had a very productive year, a very active year of things that we've been able to do together. Which one of these things do I push? Well, let's try this. Nope. Which one? Oh, on the keyboard?
N for next.
Oh, N.
P for previous.
N for next? Is that like N
Forward,
for
backward.
on a Nebraska helmet for knowledge? Is that the same?
I don't know.
Okay.
P is backwards. I don't know where you're-
Okay. This is a comparison of activity. This is how we track what we do on a monthly basis. As you'll see, first quarter of fiscal 2015, we do run on a fiscal year like the local governments in the region. You can see that at the end of the first quarter of last year, we had 4 inquiries. Those are prospects, projects. We had about 3,000 hits to the website. The average stay on the website is about 2 minutes. We had 63 research inquiries, and that could be either from our colleagues in the localities, or more often than not, it's from the commercial real estate community looking for information based on the subscriptions, data subscriptions that we have and we can work with. And you can see the type of activity that we had. Outreach is either e-blasts, our newsletter. We've got a database with nearly 3,000 constant contact names that we reach out to on a regular basis. Prospect meetings, and then how many visits that we had from prospects and site consultants. Year end, we worked 34 projects last year. 20 of those were referred from VEDP, and 14 of those were direct to the regional alliance that either they came to us directly or we found them through networking opportunities. You see a significant jump. If you went back year over year, we worked 9 projects in 2014, so a pretty significant jump from 14 to 15. A lot of that is owing to an improved economy. But we also had a pretty significant jump in website traffic. We've moved completely away from any form of advertising other than web-based, and it seems to have paid off for us. And then you can look across and see, the number of research projects that we had and track that along. I will return to this. You'll see how this gets migrated to a metrics chart, which would lead you to an ROI based on our budget. And then there's a comparison here to the first quarter of 2016, a pretty significant jump in projects. This has continued into October. Our website sessions, as you can see, continued to be up dramatically. We're more than double what we were, or right at double what we were first quarter of last year. And then again, you can look across there. I think both what we're doing on the website, what we're trying to do on sourcing leads more directly, as you'll notice, of the 10 projects in the first quarter of this year, 6 of those were direct to the regional alliance. These are organizational metrics. This just speaks more to internal goals. I know Mr. Akers is familiar with this because this is the type of information we report to the board. We did pick up 5 new private sector investors last year. We came in about $10,000 under our expense budget. We do have a significant turnover in our board, and we're recruiting new members this year. We have a 16-member board. And we had 100% collections on all pledges from the private sector, as well as what was appropriated from each of the localities in the region. Currently, we are a little over 52% privately funded. In other words, the private sector picks up 52% of our budget, 48% is from the localities. How that compares with other regional alliances, most are anywhere from 60 to 80% publicly funded. The information that you saw on the activity log, this is how it got migrated into a year-end metrics chart. The rest of this will be populated forecasting out into the future. Our board has been presented a new 3-year strategic plan. They are reviewing that now. Hopefully it'll be adopted in February, which is when our next board meeting is. And then what we'll do is we'll come down the other side, where we project out how many projects we will work in a given year, how many are in the pipeline, how many announcements we expect to get from that. As I mentioned, last year we worked 34 projects. There were 2 projects carried forward from 2014 into 2015. So that's what the pipeline means, how many were brought forward from the prior year, and then you start adding to it with current year projects. We did have 3 announcements in the region. They had a total capital investment, and those 3, we had more announcements than 3 announcements, but those are 3 announcements where we were involved with their search, with providing them information. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us if any of those were in Caroline?
None of them were.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. One of them looked in Caroline, Mr. Seeley, and you were very competitive. Just,
That was the distribution center?
yes, sir. That started out as a regional project. A little bit of how long I know you guys are working on another very significant distribution center. That distribution center actually started as a regional project in 2005 and 6. So it's been around a long time. I commend you for how hard you've worked on that one and for the work Gary's put in on it. But that's how long this takes sometimes. The connection, you may be aware of this, but the distribution center that you all are referring to that ended up in Spotsylvania, there's a common site consultant between who worked the project in 05 and who was working the Lidl project this year. So you never know, when you start building those relationships, how they'll ultimately come back to benefit you. So there is a linkage there. Unfortunately, it takes longer than we would like sometimes. $127 million in capital investments from those 3 announcements and 250 jobs. To put in perspective how big a deal that is statewide, the average statewide announcement last year was 90 jobs and I think a little over $14 million in CapEx. So, very, very significant. We did carry forward of the 36 odd projects. There's a mix and a flow in there. Some announced, some went away, some went somewhere else. But 26 we carried into the beginning of this fiscal year that were still active, that we are working, and then 10 have already been added. Actually, that number will go up in October. We've picked up about 4 more projects since the end of the first quarter that we are working. Any questions on this? Website traffic. 30,000 website hits is an interesting number. It's a large number for a regional organization of our size. We track the origin of those by state, and then we can drill down to regions within that state. What we can't tell is what the company is. Sometimes we can guess what industry they're from depending on where on our website they go. But we slice and dice this on a monthly basis. And for most of last year, these are the top 20 states that we had website hits from. The blue are regions, states that we are considering visits to this year. The yellow are ones where we made trips to last year. Actually, Connecticut, we've already gone up there once this year and had met with 3 prospects. I have to go back because 2 meetings were postponed, but hopefully we'll have those before the end of the year. Now, what do we do with this information? It goes into our marketing calendar. So this is the marketing calendar for the year. These are how we will approach the market. This is done in conjunction with our colleagues in the locality and in consideration of their priorities and in our cluster analysis. 310 Marketing is something we are piloting. We piloted it initially back in June. They're basically a lead generation firm. We tell them where we want to go, what our schedule is, what types of industries we're targeting, and they basically start dialing for meetings. And they have about a 7% yield, but you only pay them on a confirmed meeting basis. And it is a qualified prospect. Qualified prospect means they're going to make a location decision within 36 months, 36 to 48 months. And again, we pay them on a per meeting. They're not on a retainer. 310 does this for several other regional alliances across the state. They actually also do it for 2 state economic development organizations. They've also done it for people like Dominion Power, where they will find leads for you. It's not inexpensive, $1,500 a meeting, but if you look at the number of staff it would take us to make the number of calls to set up those meetings, it's a pretty effective use of dollars. We do stay in front of the business attraction folks at least twice a year at VEDP. We just went down and met with them. They're like a big site consultant firm, out of sight, out of mind. So we try to keep the region in front of them, what our activities are and things we're working on. And then you can look across there at some other meetings that we'll be doing this year. The two trips out west, the Orlando trip, which we're not doing until the spring at this point, and then the trip out to the West Coast, those are being done where I can piggyback on an outside corporate board that I serve on, where the travel expense is shared rather than purely borne by the Alliance. And then you see Craft Brewers Conference, defense communities. We have had significant interest from craft brewers. It's hard to call them craft, they're sort of mega craft at this point, but things that would be the Stone brewing size. And so we are going to that conference in Philadelphia. And then the defense communities, obviously, we are the only partner for VEDP at that one. A little bit of things, some other items that we've worked on this year that deal with regional capacity, Bowman Consulting and F&R. I think I mentioned that we were considering this back in the winter. One of the things that the state is lacking right now are what they call project-ready sites. These are sites where someone could decide to locate and be up and running in 12 to 18 months. So very short lead times. So they are sites where utilities are in place, zoning is in place. Yes, sir?
What size sites are you typically looking for when you're actually using or carrying those with you?
Be 100 acres or more.
Okay.
That's, and the reason for the 100 acres or more, the state has a very low inventory of 100-acre certified sites. Matter of fact, there are only about 4 or 5 across Virginia today that are truly certified project ready. That compares, if you look at North Carolina and the states to the south, they're dealing with 30, 40 sites that they've got available. The biggest reason that people move away from us or any region right now is we don't have a building. Building inventory has been attracting a lot of interest because as people have waited and waited and waited to decide to expand, waiting for the economy to approve, now that they want to make the investment, they want to move quickly. So what we've done is we set aside within our budget to pay 75% of the cost of 6 site audits. What the audit would do, and it's picked by the jurisdiction, the audit would tell you the baseline. What do you have and what do you not have on a site, and what are you going to have to do to get up to what would be that project-ready level, which is basically level 2. And we could talk about this for hours, but we have completed an audit of property the University of Mary Washington owns in Stafford. That was about, Mr. Seeley, a 360-acre site. And of that 360-acre site, they've probably got 100 really buildable acres because of the topography. But they do have water and sewer adjacent to the site. They've got redundant broadband. They've got a main power line coming through that site. It is adjacent to their Stafford campus, and it has frontage on 17. So it's a very attractive site. But even with that, to get it to that project level, you're probably talking a $500,000 investment to get it how far it would go. But the purpose of it is to give both the landowner and the county a baseline to have or the jurisdiction a baseline to have a conversation about what it would take to lift that up. Within that $500,000, there's a significant amount of rezoning that would need to be done there. They've got to reopen some proffers. So even within that $500,000, there's not some insignificant fees that typically a locality would charge that, in this case, they may give a consideration to waive those so they can continue to move the site forward. We just completed an audit of a little over 80 acres in the city of Fredericksburg that is basically runs right along 95 across from Central Park, on the city side of Central Park. Just began initial work on an audit on the property that the King George County owns, the private property that they've got optioned next to their industrial park. in King George. And we've had some conversations with Stafford about what other site they may want, because we didn't count the Mary Washington site against Stafford County.